Hey y'all, I'm back and I have another scary story for you guys. I wanted to read off the short scary stories subreddit. So this is like fictional stories, but not. It's like no sleep vibes if you know no sleep from Reddit. Fictional stories written as if they're true. It's the best way I can describe it. I'm so excited, so we're just gonna hop right in. This says, my wife was admitted to a hospital 25 years ago and I haven't seen them since. My pregnant wife was admitted to Gimli Hospital in 1999 for a routine induction and I haven't seen them since. Here's what happened. We came in, a doctor, Dr. Madden, checked my wife and assigned her to a room in the birthing ward. For a while, her labor progressed without problem, then it stalled. Something about her contractions being weak and dilation stuck at 7 centimeters. Dr. Madden suggested upping her dose of pitocin. When I asked what that was, he gave me a look and explained that it's a hormone, the artificial form of oxytocin, which speeds up contractions to help women deliver more quickly and safely. Apparently my wife was getting it already, he just wanted to give her more. She didn't protest. Although, to be fair, she had generally been receptive to everything since they had given her the epidural. Before that, she had been screaming. Dr. Madden asked me if I wanted things to go smoothly, and when I said yes, he punched something into the computer in the room, the one monitoring my wife's vitals and playing the constant hypnotic swoosh, swoosh sound of my baby's heartbeat, and left. But before the door shut, I heard him tell someone in the hall to go down and extract more of the hormone. I was tired, so part of me figured I might be hearing nonsense, but I couldn't understand why they'd be extracting anything. So I pressed my ear against the door and heard someone else, a nurse I presumed, say, "Depleted the current source. Do you want me to remove another tile?" I knew I hadn't heard that incorrectly, so with one last glance at my wife, peaceful, beautiful, I stepped into the hall myself. Instantly, Dr. Madden's eyes widened and he asked, "Mr. Crane, may I help you with something?" As the person he'd been speaking with turned and walked away, she didn't look like a nurse. I told Dr. Madden I wanted to stretch my legs and continued in the same direction as the disappearing non-nurse. When I was out of Dr. Madden's sight, I sped up and managed to catch a glimpse of the woman I was following just as she stepped into an operating room. After a slight hesitation, I followed. The room was empty, and the woman crossed it to another room and another after that, before finally entering a hallway which ended on a set of dark doors behind which, once she had pushed them open, was a stairway leading down. She didn't appear to have noticed me following her, so after waiting for half a minute, I went down the stairs too. Immediately, I felt like I was in a place I didn't belong, witnessing something I shouldn't be. The walls, which had started as bare concrete, soon became carved out rock, and the lights became further spaced apart, creating longer and longer stretches of darkness between islands of light. A few times I nearly tripped and fell, catching myself at the last moment. I knew I was making a lot of noise, but I didn't care. I had even stopped paying attention to the woman I'd been following, distracted by the realization that as I'd begun to sweat, the tunnel itself sweated too. Liquid. I hesitate to call it water, which seemed as if excreted by the walls themselves, reflected the infrequent lighting unnaturally, and gathered, dripped, making the stairs slippery, causing my shoes to slide over them. Eventually the stairs ended and I found myself in a large room which has been carved out of rock and whose floor was a pattern of hundreds of alternating black and white tiles. Some of them had been removed. The woman was kneeling and using a crowbar to force off one of the tiles that was still in place. Her efforts echoed throughout the room. I was maybe 15 steps away from her when she managed to dislodge the tile, revealing beneath it a deep, writhing darkness that looked as if space itself had turned into reptilian skin. I managed to call out to her. I awoke with a throbbing head lying in a hospital bed and Dr. Madden's face smiling at me. "Mr. Crane," he said as I blinked him into focus, "I'm so very glad to see you awake again. You appear to have taken quite the fall, ending with a nasty blow to the head." "Where's my wife?" I asked him. "In the birthing room," he assured me, "and don't worry, you haven't slept through the big moment." "Is she okay?" He seemed taken aback. "Of course. In fact, she's doing very well, and her labor is progressing splendidly after her new dosage of pitocin." I leapt out of bed, or tried to. I was restrained. "For your protection," Dr. Madden said, explaining that because of my head injury, I could be concussed, confused, or unstable, leaving it ambiguous whether he meant physically or mentally. I ordered him to release me. "Very well," he said, and motioned toward a part of the room I could not see, and from whose unsighted dark corner the woman I'd been following emerged, carrying a syringe filled with the same black substance I had seen below the dislodged tile. "No," I protested. "Not that. I don't want that." "No need to be hysterical," said Dr. Madden, taking the syringe. "There's no reason for us to give you pitocin." Then, much to my surprise, he undid my restraints and allowed me to run out of the room. I was in an unknown part of the hospital. I tried to catch my bearings, I tried to find a sign, anything to help me navigate and return to my wife, but there was nothing. The walls were bare. What's more, in whatever direction I tried to run, the hospital itself seemed to fade out, its transparency falling enough to reveal, behind the walls, a starscape. I was hyperventilating. I was in a wheelchair, rushed into an operating room, the same one I'd passed through earlier, but this time it was prepped for a procedure. I was lifted out of the chair and placed on a cold table. Above me there was no ceiling, only stars embedded in writhing reptilian skin, which descended. And when I shut my eyes in terror, instead of darkness, it was my wife's hospital room I saw, and Dr. Madden standing beside her. My wife was giving birth, but as she did, her skin darkened and thickened, and she became unhuman. And the baby, crowning, was something else entirely. Something horrible. Something alien. I barely evaded the 18-wheeler, which roared past honking. I was crawling along the dry, unpaved shoulder of a highway. Sutures ran through both sides of my face. My head was shaved. I hadn't had sutures, and I had had hair. When I looked around and saw the empty field before me, I remembered that there had been a hospital here, Gimli Hospital, where my pregnant wife had been admitted for a routine induction in 1999. I stepped into the middle of the highway, stopped a car, and asked what day it was. February 29th, 2024, the petrified driver told me. 25 years. What about the hospital, I asked. What hospital, she said. There was no hospital here, and there never was. Later, when I had regained more of my senses, I did research and discovered that indeed, there had been no hospital there. As for my wife, I learned from my grieving in-laws that she had died in a car accident in 1999. She had been pregnant. I had been in the accident too and survived, but ever since I had suffered bouts of delirium and entered into confused states in which I talked endlessly about Gimli Hospital and other insanities. Perhaps I would have believed them, if not for one thing. Several weeks ago, I came across an online story written by someone trapped inside of a hospital. You can imagine how my mind convulsed when I read that this was Gimli Hospital, a hospital which, in their words, exists only if you believe in it. Since then, I have found several more references to Gimli Hospital and disappearing hospitals more broadly. Writing this is my attempt to force my mind to remember. Maybe if I remember the rooms, the layout, the smells, the sounds, I can make the place manifest again. Maybe my wife is still there, still giving birth. Maybe not. Maybe she was abducted. We were both abducted. There may be aliens here on Earth already, buried underneath, living and using us to breed. If only I could find more evidence. If I could get my hands on the black substance and send it to a lab for analysis, then they'd confirm it wasn't of this world at all. I don't believe my wife had been cheating on me, as my mother-in-law once told me. I believe the night sky is descending. Sometimes I have nightmares that I'm driving, my wife beside me, and suddenly I turn the steering wheel and the impact of the 18-wheeler wrecks my sleep, and I find myself awake, once more following a woman I don't know down empty hallways and through operating rooms, downstairs into the place with the alternating black and white tiles and the horror stuff beneath. Aliens was the absolute last thing that I expected that story to be about, and I kind of loved it. I feel like a lot of these stories, while they're so amazing, I feel like I'm able to predict the outcome or like the reason behind something. I had no idea where that was going like the entire time. It's also so interesting because you really don't have an answer for what was going on, because he really could just be going insane from losing his wife and getting into the car accident, whatever, or there could be alien, like you have no idea. And I'm like, honestly, I don't want to think too hard about it. This is gonna drive me nuts. Okay, and this next story says, I got a letter from my dead wife. Luke held the letter with shaky hands, trying hard to process what he was seeing. No, it can't be, he thought. Jumping from disbelief to anger, he could not settle his mind on what the situation was. If this wasn't a prank, then the other option was impossible. His eyes scanned over the words, paying close attention to the handwriting. It was most definitely his wife. Susanna's handwriting, but how could it be? She had been dead for 5 years. He took time to investigate the envelope, which was as ordinary as they come. There was no return address, just his written on the center. If it really was Susanna, he wasn't sure whether to be elated or deeply saddened, yet like emotions can be sometimes, it was both. Tears welled up as he thought on the words she used and realized that it sounded just like her. It was obvious from the letter that she was sad, expressing how much she had missed him and wished they could be together again. The more Luke thought about it, he decided he would burn the letter. He had gotten so far in grieving and was almost ready to move on. This would just pull him back into a depression again. So with a heavy heart, he started a fire and whispered his goodbyes to his wife. He poked the letter and the fire around until nothing was left but ash. Before long, the warmth from the fire soothed him, and he fell asleep in his chair. The next day, Luke went about his routine, and before he knew it, he was home from work. As he walked into the door, he sorted the junk mail from the rest, and that's when he saw it. Another letter. He threw it on the dining room table and stood unmoving, watching the envelope as if he expected it to do something. Then he sat and stared at it. Over time, curiosity won over trepidation. Unfolding the letter, he read, "Luke, this has been so hard for me to be away from you. I just really need to speak to you again. It's taken time, but I'm in a better place now than I was. Even then, I want to hear from you one last time. Even if we can't embrace again, we can still talk, can't we? It's okay if you don't want to write back because it's too difficult. I'll understand, but can you try at least once for me? I will await your consideration. Yours forever, Susanna." Exhaling slowly, Luke tried to wrap his head around it all. Perhaps he was losing his mind and should talk to someone? Talk to someone, he said aloud. There was a simple way to settle his mind on this supernatural matter, so he made a phone call. The next day, his brother came over and they engaged in small talk. "So what is this you invited me over for? Sounded important." "Yeah, this is gonna sound weird, but hear me out." Luke laid the envelope on the table in front of his brother. "This showed up in my mailbox yesterday, and there was one before it, and I burned it. Are you being blackmailed?" No, it's unbelievable though. It's a letter." "Okay, so what?" "From Susanna." His brother eyed him suspiciously, looking for any sign of deception. "From Susanna?" "Yes, it's in her handwriting. It's the same way she speaks. I thought it was a horrible prank and I was so angry, but it has to be her. Just read it, please." With caution and a dark curiosity, his brother picked up the letter and began to skim over the page, and after a couple of seconds, he gave Luke a sidelong glance. "What is this you're trying to pull?" "What? I'm not trying to..." "Luke, come on, it's blank. This some stupid joke about your deceased wife, no less? Have you lost it completely?" "No, look at me, there's writing on it. I've been doing great, that's why it's so shocking to me, because I'm not sad. I'm not looking for her, it just came to me out of the blue." "Well, if you're not sad, then you're crazy. This is just a blank piece of paper." He stood up and stormed out of the house. "And don't talk to me about this again, it's a waste of my time and energy." Luke stood at the front door, dumbfounded. He glanced at the paper and still saw the words scrawled across the page. "So only I can see it. Something utterly strange is going on here." Not knowing what else to do, he sat in front of the fire and thought the situation over. He grabbed a piece of paper and a pen, then took to writing. 10 minutes later, he finished his response to Susanna and put it in the mailbox with the flag raised. Now, time was all he needed. A week later, Luke no longer expected anything back. In vain hopes, he checked his mailbox every day, but nothing came. Perhaps his letter never reached Susanna, or that she had given up on him and stopped writing. Or perhaps he made up everything in his head and he was too crazy to know something was wrong with him. Then the letter came. Ripping open the letter, he quickly purveyed the contents and shouted in victory. They were able to reach each other after all, as she responded to everything he mentioned in his letter. Luke had stumbled upon something marvelous, melancholy indeed, but also marvelous. So he wrote back, excited to write to his beloved once more and talk about life. This continued for some time, but he never mentioned any of it to his family. Since his brother was mad enough over the whole thing, he acted as if it never happened. All things concerned, Luke was quite happy. Until one day, the letter stopped. Luke wrote back every day since, hoping it would somehow stir a reaction, but it never did. In fact, the letters returned to him despite not listing a return address. It wasn't a fluke, the letters just weren't getting to Susanna anymore. So he waited and waited. An unknown amount of time went by, and Luke was awakened by a knock at the door. He was instantly intrigued, as no one came to see him at this hour. In fact, he had fallen asleep in front of the fire again, and it was quite late. He called out for whoever it was, but they only responded with more knocking. It felt very ominous, but he was prepared for any intruders with a Louisville slugger. There was no way for him to get a clear view of his doorstep, so he cracked the door open just enough to get a clear view. When he saw who it was, he dropped the bat in astonishment and opened the door. Two women sat together on a front porch, gazing out across the street as they sipped tea and conversed. Most would imagine a tea talk during sunny weather, but these two loved the opposite even more. The rain was coming down, creating a very interesting atmosphere, along with a pleasant ping on the roof. That's odd, the first woman said. What's that? My neighbor across the street. She hasn't been outside today. Well, that's not strange. The weather's terrible. Not for her. I always see her checking her mailbox, even after the postman's come. Really? Why would she come out again after she's collected her mail? The first woman got a funny look, and the second knew something was amiss. What? Why are you looking that way? That woman, her name is Susanna. I want to tell you something about her, but don't repeat it. Oh, you don't need to. I mean it. She's been a good friend of mine, and we both know you have a big mouth, so please don't mention this to anyone. I promise, especially if it would upset you that much. Okay, so Susanna told me that she's been going to therapy ever since her husband passed. To help her cope, the psychiatrist suggested that she write a letter to her husband telling him anything that she wanted. But Susanna didn't stop there. She actually put the letter in the mailbox. Since then, she's been receiving letters back from her husband. I was immediately concerned. Her husband's been dead for 5 years. I'm afraid she's still struck with grief. My God, poor thing. You never stop grieving, they say. I couldn't believe it, of course. I didn't want to play to any delusion she may have, so I told her to show me the letter. And she did. It was just a blank piece of paper. Oh, do you think she's lost it? Maybe, I don't know. She has been feeling under the weather recently, so maybe that's got something to do with it. Her lungs haven't been the same since the fire. What fire? Don't you remember? Her husband died alongside his brother from a house fire. He fell asleep in his favorite chair by the fireplace, and an ember ignited the rug. She was the only one who survived. Oh, I remember it now. That was horrible. It was. Come to think of it, maybe I should go check on her. I'm starting to think something might be wrong. That is absolutely the saddest thing. Oh my God. My mind is all over the place because, again, I feel like I did not expect the outcome of that one at all. That's not where I expected it to go. And now I'm sad. I seriously love No Sleep and the short scary stories. Those were longer than I feel like they typically are on short scary stories. Those really just felt like No Sleep stories, but I really miss reading those. I feel like I need to revisit No Sleep soon. But that's all I have for now. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys have any short, scary, fictional stories, No Sleep stories, anything like that you want to share with me in the community, I will have my subreddit linked down below. I'm not going to ramble at the end of this, mainly because I did a market yesterday for Petal and Clover and some of my Depop stuff, and I am exhausted. I feel like my brain is fried. I was going to ramble about the market, but I honestly am just I feel like my brain's not here. That's why I wanted to read the short scary stories, because it doesn't take as much, I don't know. It does take a lot of brain power to process the stories, I feel like, especially because both of those went in a direction that I wasn't expecting. But I feel like I don't have to commentate throughout the story because I feel like I can't be funny right now. My brain not working. I slept 11 hours last night and I normally sleep 8 or 9, and I was drained after yesterday, and I'm honestly still fucking drained, so I'm just gonna go. But I love you guys so much, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.